Hi, friends. Do you remember me from such internet television programs as Talking with Famous People? Do you? Do you remember me fondly or with anger in your heart? Try not to remember me with anger in your heart. That's just going to make you feel like a hateful Nathan. Which type should govern? I've got a theory in mind. Basically, the meta-analysts should govern. Probably have the executives below the meta-analysts, the analysts below the executives, and the executors at the bottom of the hierarchy. Now, if this is the case, then you need the fewest ENTPs, INTPs, INFJs, and ENFJs. You need the second fewest ESTPs, ENTJs, INFPs, and ISTJs. And then you're not fucking my what? I don't plan on getting vaccinated for anything. But I might, depending on the circumstances. It doesn't seem, I don't think there's ever going to be a vaccine that works. Coronavirus is very resistant to vaccine. It doesn't seem to, the antibodies don't persist within the bloodstream very long. Well, Mike Jones, I appreciate you making a concrete prediction. I'm going to predict the alternative is so, namely that I will have a choice, and or that the vaccine won't ever even come to fruition. So we'll see who's right when the time arrives. I'm going to claim that I'm right in the interim, and you claim that you're right in the interim, and one of us will be proved wrong. That's the beautiful thing about reality, and making clear affirmations like you made right there. You know? Oh, they do. In my understanding, they work beneath the decision makers, the understanders. The meta-analysts are the understanders at the top level. They're the ultimate decision makers. ENTP is in charge of affirming. INTP is in charge of negating. INFJ is in charge of, well, like the NFJs are in charge of the communication half of things, and the NTPs are in charge of the decision making half of things. ESTPs are underneath ENTPs and INTPs, along with ENTJs. And then on the other side of the equation, you've got the helper types for INFJ and ENFJ, which are ISFJ and INFP. And then below that, you've got the analysts who are working to, you know, it's where you are in the hierarchy. So it's like INTJs will help to implement the ESTP, ENTJ management, so to speak. Well, that's why we keep them not at the top, Clayton McCormick. One of them's at level 2, one of them's at level 3. And at the bottom level, you got your executors. You need more of those than anything else. The executors include ISTJ, ESTJ, and both the SFP types. So if the world were organized like the ideal organizational structure, you'd have the fewest NTPs, and NFJs. You'd have second fewest ENTJs, ESTPs, INFPs, and ISFJs. The third fewest INTJs, ISTPs, ENFPs, and ESFJs, and then the most quantity of ESTJs, ISTJs, and both of SFPs. Because obviously you need the fewest instances of the highest level of hierarchy, and the most instances the lowest level of hierarchy. It's like a pyramid, right? Now, granted, this is just for governance, for public governance. And the reasons for this are because what matters in public governance and making sure that the government is doing what it's supposed to be doing properly is the exclusion of the subjective, because we're talking about what's most universally defensible, because we're talking about something that affects everybody. And so on that grounds, the most important thing is constraint away from the unprincipled. NTPs are the best types to make the decisions as a consequence. Not because we're the smartest, it's because we're the most universalist in our thinking. We're thinkers, universalist thinkers, the most universalist thinkers. So that's why NTPs, ENTPs, and INFPs are most well equipped to govern. INFJs and ENFJs are the other half of governance. There's two halves, right? There's policy and there's communications. NFJs are in charge of communications, NTPs in charge of policy. The next level, the ENTJ ESTP level, which also includes, interestingly, INFP and ISFJ, that level, the decisions the NTPs make are rendered into actually executable plans by ENTJ and ESTP, and are the components, the varying tasks to be assigned in those plans are expressed to people by the ISFJ and INFP, or they're in charge in general of human resources kind of stuff, you know. And then so forth on that. How do you feel about modern Marxism? Well, it's important to remember, Mike Jones, first of all, the answer to the question is, let's define capitalism accurately first. Capitalism is the absence of violence that unjustly controls people. So if I'm able to sell you a typing session, let's say you decided one day you wanted to get a typing session with me, you paid the $100, the absence of somebody with a gun stealing some of that money or otherwise forcing me to not do that, that's capitalism. The absence of an unjust use of force is capitalism. So how do I feel about modern Marxism? Well, to the extent that it deviates from capitalism, because Marxism fundamentally says, in modern society, isn't Marxism logical? No, because you're just saying that some people should arbitrarily use violence against other people for justifications that they think matter. But their justifications never matter. You never want to be subject to Marxism yourself. I'm not selling my soul for $100. Not even for $150. I mean, that's the thing, Mike Jones. Isn't murder and theft really okay in modern society? No, of course not. And that's what Marxism is: murder and theft. So yeah, we should ascribe to principles no matter what stage of society. I agree. The most intelligent people in the world should be making decisions on the future. I should be the decision maker for sure. I should be the president, possibly king of the world or whatever, because I prioritize what matters. I understand. Other people do not understand. Other people are inflamed by their passions. Other people are inadequately dispassionate about things to make the correct decision. Not so for me. I'm adequately dispassionate to make the correct decision. But we see how critical communication is. So Trump's been right about this virus from the get-go. He's had the right position on it from the get-go. But why did nobody listen to him? Because he didn't communicate the right justifications. He didn't explain why he was right. He just said, I have a hunch. Mike Jones, it doesn't matter if they're trust fund babies with degrees or not. What matters is if somebody is capable of the kind of thinking that's necessary for governance. I am capable of that kind of thinking. A lot of people are not. What correlates with that is irrelevant. It's not the case that we should never elect somebody who's rich because they must be wicked. That's absolute bullshit. We should never elect somebody who's not speaking correctly, who doesn't have the right kind of discourse. This is what the right kind of discourse sounds like. It sounds like somebody who's parsing things based on what makes the most sense, what's logical, etc. It doesn't matter, Mike Jones. Again, you're focused on the person, not the principle, and that's where you lead us astray. And so it's like somebody like Mike Jones or Trump, both of them were ESFPs. Trump's the same as you, Mike Jones. The same sort of certainty without justification. And that's what cannot be permitted as a governor. No, should Trump be governing? Absolutely not. He's an absolute fucking nightmare. He makes the same kind of arguments you do, Mike Jones, which are terrible arguments. That's not how you lead a people. To lead a people means to make defensible arguments. To be able to win the arguments because you are correct. To be able to win the arguments means you're correct. I do know which type should govern. ENTPs and INTPs. INFJs and ENFJs. So you're on that team too. Why? Because those are the only four types that have universalists in the first two slots. And governance is fundamentally a matter of what is most fair, just, and right and true universally, what's most defensible, not about whose interests should be served. Trump does admit that. Trump is making that claim. I just read a news article that says exactly this. It says, everyone is lying, says Trump, undercutting public officials and fresh attacks. Is that not clear enough to you? He's specifically saying everybody's lying about this. Why would he admit that it's a fraud? He's not been in favor of this COVID bullshit from the get-go. He's been opposed to it. Does not reality matter at all to you, Mike Jones? The reality is Trump's been. It's not within his power to reopen the country immediately. This governor of California shut down California. The president cannot force him to reopen California. I agree that Trump bent a little bit and decided to wear a mask on one occasion. And I agree that he shouldn't have. But that's him being imperfect, ignores the fact that he's vastly more correct about everything regarding COVID than 99% of the country. So why are you busting his chops of all people? I don't like Trump, but he's been right about COVID. I bet when this COVID shit started, Mike Jones, that you were all in favor of it at first. I bet. Do you remember back then? Did you support the quarantine? They don't have more power, Mike Jones. If you're an American, you should know this, for God's sake. You are part of a system of dual sovereignty. There are state sovereignties and federal sovereignties. What happened to our fucking school system? How can you not know that? It's not a fraud, though, Mike Jones. It's a horrible, panicked overreaction and overprioritization. It's incurring a massive opportunity cost, but it is not a fraud. It's a real thing. It's not like there's not a virus that's going around. There is. I mean, it's good to be skeptical of the mainstream narrative, but only if you're good at skepticism. You don't know when to be skeptical and when not, and you're not applying skepticism. You're just NI fourth all over in the fucking place. No, Mike Jones, it shouldn't. In the United States, the federal government is supposed to be the government of the state government and not of the people. And the people are supposed to be governed directly by the state governors. You've got it backwards. It is, in fact, the states who are the members of the organization that elects a governing body of the states called the federal government. It's been bastardized since its original form into this current kind of miasma of federal overreach, but that's a terrible, terrible thing, Mike Jones. Not a good thing. The governor has no actual legitimate power to compel people to do these things. The problem is I can't. If it were individual citizens who were getting who were having force used against them to compel them to do stuff, this would be over quick. Instead, it's just businesses. We need more businesses to stand up and say, "I will open anyway, and you come arrest me, and then let's see you in court." Right now, everyone's just complying to avoid having to deal with the legal complications of fighting it. Neither the president nor the governor has executive powers that justify a quarantine or a lockdown like this. Neither of them do. COVID-19 is not the normal seasonal flu, but you are right to compare it against a seasonal flu. COVID-19 is less deadly than the average seasonal flu and less harmful in general. That's true. And therefore, we should not treat it so vastly differently than the seasonal flu. But Mike Jones, people like you and your narratives don't help. It's easy to dismiss you and what you're saying. Because why? Because you don't make good justifications. So I don't like it when people who are easy to dismiss are arguing on the same side as me. I'd rather you be against COVID, you know? It's like you have to make good arguments. You're going to make arguments at all about something like this, or else you're just hurting your team. Yeah, I think Mike Jones might be cloud. That's possible. Certainly is possible. But I don't know. Would an ISTJ be a good candidate for president? No. Terrible candidate. Terrible idea. He might be cloud. I think that's a reasonable enough guess. But I don't have enough evidence to make the claim. Well, thanks, Morridge. I appreciate your reasonableness. ENTP, INTP, INFJ, ENFJ, the meta-analysts. The four types that have metaphysical functions. And why? Because they're the most universalist. And governing is all about what's best for the whole, the universal. It's not about what's best for the individual, this group or that group, or your own personal pet interest, or your own outraged FI feelings of justice and injustice. And What's my hypothesis? I don't have a hypothesis. I'm not presenting any hypotheses here. Wah, laughing my ass off. It's 6-slot FE lawnmower. It's demonstrative. And in ESFP, that 6-slot FE, unlike an ENFP, it seems mind-bogglingly ineffective and ill-advised to an intuitive. But it doesn't seem that way to sensors. Please give you 3 reasons why an ISTJ isn't a good candidate. Polar FE, you need to be able to read people a little bit to be a president. You need to be able to understand FE considerations when dealing with making decisions about other world leaders and stuff. Second reason, not quick enough on their feet. When you can't go into every situation in life as president with a full game plan of exactly how it's just going to go down. Most of the time, you got to be fairly quick on your feet in dealing with things. And the third reason is you need to be constrained by principalism, and ISTJs countervalue that. So they'll be trying to solve problems and isolate problems as though they didn't have repercussions outside of their narrow channel of efficacy, and that's exactly when you get things like COVID. The COVID shutdown is a very ISTJ idea. Explain to you the meaning of these acronyms, Mike Jones. It's a lot of explaining. It's a lot of explaining, but the gist of it is people pay attention in different ways. They can know, they can act, they can interface, or they can deliberate. And the order of those, if you have a deliberation function first, you always have an action function second, and vice versa. No, INTJ is not fit to be at the top level of governance. They don't understand the need to apply universalism appropriately. That's why they have so many crazy theories and stuff. INTJs are not equipped. That's NI run wild. NI run wild. You don't want NI run wild at the top. You need it. Like as president, I will definitely have INTJ advisors and cabinet members and stuff, because when you have a specific problem you put in front of them, they're genius. The problem with being president is it's not a specific problem. It's a series of not specific problems. It's a series of rules that impact society in a variety of ways, and that resonate as legitimate or not in a variety of ways. And you've got to wade that thorny cactus garden full of competing claims and interests to determine what the best course of action is. That's not a good place for an INTJ to be. That's too up-framed for an INTJ. INTJs need to operate within a frame. They can't continually frame up and play metaframe all the time. So that's why INTJs are, well, they're top at efficiency, not tops at fairness. No, that's not true. The INTJ actually countervalues fairness when it interferes with their. I mean, INTJ as president. I mean, ENTJs would be a better choice than an INTJ, but that's still a problem. And the problem is basically the particularist knowledge polar is a problem, because you have to be. This is why ENTPs and INTPs are the best governing types, is because we are universalist, but we have SI, which makes us particularist in our knowing. So we can put ourselves in other people's shoes, even if we don't have FI. It's like, okay, but we have to consider the experience of these individuals as well. The ENTJs think the experience of individuals doesn't matter, that everybody needs to, embrace their vision so that it becomes reality or something. Hillary, I'm not sure. Obama's an ENTP, but I'm not going to be that kind of ENTP. I mean, look. If you want to say, well, Obama was an ENTP and he was a bad president, true, but that's because there are too many non-ENTPs, INTPs, INFJs, ENFJs in government. They need to be. If we just had a government full of those types, everything would be better off, a lot better off. Obama was just a weak ENTP. He went in thinking he was going to be able to FE his way through shit. That's the problem. ISTP has no business being president. Not a good idea. But on the plus side, they probably won't do a whole hell of a lot. ESTP as president should be fine. I think they would cause little harm compared to other kind of types. Compared to a lot of types. Worst possible type to be president? Our current president, ESFP. See, he didn't go into the presidency with an understanding that a lot of people won't work within a discursive frame that's cooperative. You have to be adversarial and combative. And, it's like the techniques that Obama never uses in the ENGP are techniques that I'm very good at. I am not afraid to spend a lot of time talking in news media about how I want that coward to stand here and defend his fucking position because it's bullshit. I have no problem calling people to task. I'm not interested in Biden's not fit to be president. Everybody knows this. I mean, no, it's not true, Lenore. You're never going to get weak ESFPs. Trump is an example of a strong ESFP, and he is not better than Obama. He's worse. Obama was bad, but he's worse. And he's worse for a number of reasons, but mostly because he has no regard for the truth. Obama didn't know what to do when he couldn't, when he had to use the stick half of FE. Obama was so accustomed to being able to use the carrot half of FE that when the world required him to kick some ass and take some names, he didn't know what to do. He was disillusioned by how difficult everything was and how nobody was playing fair. What he didn't understand is when that happens, you need to go put your foot up their ass. You don't need to just sit there and take it like a little bee. Eric, I'm in love with an alien. What should I do? Have sex with it? Tie a ribbon on it? I don't know. Have sex with it seems the obvious answer. No, NFPs have no business being president. None whatsoever. INFPs don't know how to pull a trigger, and ENFPs have crazy nonsense ideas. Neither of them should ever be elected to any public office. There is no gay agenda, Mike Jones. You think that the gays are getting together and saying, here's our agenda. Let's push it. Well, I mean, what is their agenda? That they'd like to not be subject to arbitrary discrimination anymore and hatred for no reason? Or there is a reason. People who don't like homosexuality, usually males who are anxious to have a little bit of penis in their mouth. You're an idiot because you drank coffee before trying to sleep? That doesn't sound like idiocy. That just sounds like prioritizing your first taste bud needs over your sleep needs. The destruction of the alpha male. Gaginda. The destruction of the alpha male. What does that mean, Mike Jones? I wonder what it's like to just base your thoughts on feelings. How about ISFJ? ISFJ can't be president. ESFJ has no business being president. ESTJ would probably be a pretty effective president. But I just, they're NI-polar. That's the problem with the ESTJ. They're NI-polar. When there's something determinate and they need to make the right decision, they will trust whoever trust whoever advisor they've historically trusted, and they don't have any NI themselves. They can't make the ultimate decision about things. Who wants to make men effeminate? You know, it's interesting because I don't think I've ever heard any women say they find effeminate men sexually attractive. And heterosexual men are broadly in favor of getting chicks, you know? So there's an inherent economy to the sexual dynamic of men and women that makes that a silly thing to concern yourself about. Yeah, right, Lenore. I don't like it when people make terrible arguments in favor of positions that I hold, or when they, which I basically see as typically as co-opting words. That somebody who's not really on the side of goodness is co-opting the words of goodness, or somebody who's not really on the side of evil is being co-opted by the words of evil. Emperor Bummer. Can Krista Summer Purdue? I'm going to transubstantiate this one to you, okay? You haven't had one in a while. I transubstantiate to you. Et voila. Are you feasting upon the tender shoots of my bamboo? Well, Mike Jones, listen. It's true that there are just two genders, male and female. But it's also true that you can slide all up and down that wet spectrum. Oh, yeah. I go from super ultra manly to slightly womanly and back again, all in that range. Don't worry, my pronouns don't change. I'm still a he. But there are times every month, Mike Jones, when I, like any healthy man, has to get in touch with his inner uterus, my inner bosom, my inner uterus, my inner vagina. Inside of me, a man, lives a shadow woman. She has shadow boobs, shadow uterus, shadow vagina. And about once a month, she takes over and then she starts touching herself and making sounds like Japanese girls in pornography. Like that. And that's how I get in touch with my inner woman. I literally get in touch with my inner woman. Inner uterus. Uteri are inner. Okay, but I mean my inner uterus, okay? Daenerys Targaryen? I don't even know who the hell that is. You nasty. Mr. Strauss, if you're nasty, okay? You can call me Eric, but I'm Mr. Strauss if you're nasty. I suspect you're correct, Lawnmower. I don't think we'd be blessed with two distinct ESFPs. No, I mean, But Nicholas Watson, it is true that my inner female scissors with other people's inner females. So, like about at the same time, if it coincides. If Cameron's monthly is the same as my monthly, we're both, manifesting our inner woman, then of course we'll get right down to scissoring. It ain't real womanhood until you scissored. Well, in this case, Cloud, I would suspect it's because Mike Jones had been saying a lot of very Cloud-like stuff, and he's very similar to you. So that's probably why people think it's you. So Kevin, Chen, and James, and everybody, let me explain something. A few years back, I cued in on the great secret, they call it. The women call it this, the great secret. And the great secret is all women, when they meet another woman and there are no men around, to greet each other, they quickly remove their pants, their undergarments, and they scissor. It's just how, it's called snipping the scissor. It's called snipping the sisterhood. We're just snipping. We're sissing. They can have little nicknames for us stuff. Well, you gotta snip the sisterhood. And then they scissor. Off with the panties, off with the pants. Leave their shirt on because they're just gonna get right back up and put their pants back on. But they don't scissor when they're on their period. And they tend not to scissor when they've been doing a lot of exercise, if they're particularly sweaty and swampy down there, then they'll hold off and say, I'm a little swampy. You don't want to get bog water on you. Anyway, that's how women greet each other. And how many scissoring women did it take on your party? Just 2. Just 2. No, he isn't. I remember calling him Sheep when he appeared. Oh, well, you would never call yourself Sheep. Now, that would be a surprise, Morridge. If that were the real plot twist, the Cloud's actually also lawnmower with a third phone, then that would be surprising. Then Cloud would really have pulled something off. It's easy to act the same in another person. Die of shock? I mean, I'm pretty sure that my dad's plumbing doesn't work very well anymore. He's had issues with his prostate and stuff. He's not bold at all. ISTPs don't like changing horses in midstream and can't think of the possible unintended outcomes that their actions might have. You retracted it, but I got the general gist of the joke. I once fingered a fortune teller when she was on her period, and I got my palm read for free. That's good stuff, Nick. It's excellent, excellent stuff. Yeah, any polar invalidates you from being president. You need to be able to be ideationally open and interactive, ideationally interactive and reactive and responsive, and you need to have the answers for people. You need to be able to face people's questions and answer them consistently, time and again. And if people want to feel as though justice is being done, then they need to have their questions answered. You can't just ignore people's objections or ignore rhetorical slope when making decisions. And that's what Trump does. He ignores rhetorical slope. It doesn't matter whether his idea is good or bad. To him, that's mostly irrelevant. You still didn't get it right, Nicholas Watson. You left out. You just put, I once a gypsy. I once a gypsy. Once again. Twice now a gypsy for my friend. Go ahead, retract it, Nicholas Watson. You messed it up again. Will you never get this joke out properly? I guess not. I want a pizza party. For why do you deserve a pizza party? You get straight A's? Did you sell the most books in Girl Scout? Do I tolerate a girl with hairy pits? I mean, you know, when Rachel's pits get a little too hairy, I'll shave them. You know, she'll shave them sometimes. That's not. I don't like hairy pits on a girl, but I don't expect her to shave off her pubes. Rachel's very has kind of like very inoffensive, fine, kind of silky pube hairs. So, and not a whole ton of them. It's not like a big old thicket of pubes or whatever. So, it doesn't bother me at all. But yeah, hairy pits kind of bother me a little bit. Also, like if my woman has any hairs coming out of her chin or her upper lip or something, then I want to pluck those for sure. You want a pizza party because I'm so smart? I don't think you get a pizza party just for that, though. I don't want to be the infinite ruler. I would like to be president, and I think he'll be an effective president. I think he'll be the best president we've had in a long time. I plan to only serve one term, but in theory, I might serve two, I guess. Probably not, though. I can't imagine wanting to do it for 4 years, for more than 4 years. Do I want to come to your pizza party? Do I? Yes, I do want to come to your pizza party. Hi, Zandy. You're what? You're on fire? Roll on the ground. Don't bother chatting when you're on fire. You should be the first INTJ prime minister. America doesn't have a prime minister, James. How do you plan to self-promote a potential campaign? I don't know. I don't know. I'm waiting for the universe to tell me something. I mean, the thing is, my plan all along was to not run until 2024. So perhaps the best answer is I plan to seriously begin the endeavor after 2020, after the new administration comes in. Free pizza slice for a vote, and then you have my vote. That's illegal. You can't buy people's votes. A pizza party sounds so dirty. It sounds less dirty than a vaginal blood sploosh splash party. Eric, what if you need to jump on board with a particular agenda in order to get funding as a candidate? I mean, that's never the case. It is never the case that you need to do something to get funding as a candidate. The reality is this. My positions are pretty much all articulated out already. I've got an in progress platform that explains what my positions are and A person can come talk to me about what my positions are, ask me those positions, and if they go along with, if my positions are what they want, then in other words, their positions are the same and they want to fund that, then they can fund me. If their position differs from mine, then they're welcome to talk to me about that and how I should prefer their position. But for me to prefer their position, they have to win the argument. It doesn't matter whether they give me money or not. After all, they give me money because they believe I'm the better decision maker than anybody else running for president, and that they can better trust me to make decisions than other people. I'm not going to be bribed or no catches with me. I set the frame going in. What will she do as first lady? I don't know. She probably have some first lady thing. You know, it's like first ladies always have something they do, but I would let her. I mean, obviously, she needs to decide what she wants to do herself. I don't doubt, Lawnmower, that there are plenty of people out there who, when they give a lot of money for to a political candidate, believe it should buy them some influence. Well, it won't with me. What buys influence from somebody for me is always the same thing. Just be right. You want to influence me? Be correct. I'll go right along with you. You know, that's how you influence me. Be correct. Is everybody in general able to have the exact same access to attempting to convince me they're right? No. So it might be true that people who are bigger donors are going to have some manner of access to try to convince me of something that maybe somebody else wouldn't. That's possible. But it doesn't matter because the same metric applies either way. If they're right, then they don't need to give me anything for me to adopt their point of view. In fact, they couldn't give me anything to stop me from adopting their point of view because, after all, they're right. And I don't want to be wrong. But if they're not correct, it doesn't matter. They gave me everything in the fucking world. I'm not going to, for me to feel like for me to feel self-satisfied at the end of a presidency, I need to know that I did my job properly, that I put first the public good and not my own good or interests, that I was not there to profit from it, but rather to do what that nobody's been able to do before, and maybe ever in the history of the world, let alone America, which is actually get everybody talking meaningfully about things. You know, to attack the issues of groupism, blame cycles, partisanship, and other sort of bullshit. To put an end to this monstrous fear underneath so many people's worldview that, as expressed here by Fyag Kyuk, Eric, they would kill you if you try that. There's no day. You need to stop that shit. There are many, many days is another way to put it. But I absolutely will be president, and my presidency will demonstrate to everybody that it is not true that truth, justice, and the American way can't prevail. They can. In fact, this citizen democracy can be reinvigorated, reborn in the image of something better than it was ever envisioned in the first place, namely as a forward-looking, right-minded, rights-respecting, principle-driven, but most importantly, correct discourse-driven society. Right now, the big problem isn't any specific policy. It's that we aren't talking about policy correctly. And when we start talking about policy correctly, we don't have to worry so much about bad individual policies. There will always be bad individual policies, but we have to talk about policy correctly first. So what kind of justifications are you making for your advocacy? Are those the right kind of justifications? Are they appropriate for the advocacy? Have you done the framework? Have you determined whether this advocacy is best justified by a utilitarian or principlist framework? Or are there principles concerns you're not addressing? Have you addressed why we ought to prioritize your utilitarian impacts over your principlist impacts, for example? If you are trying to say utility despite, then have you explained why to prioritize? If we can generalize this. And the answer is, well, no. And the other answer is a lot of types aren't equipped to do that. INFJs and ENFPs need to sit around and discuss this shit and figure it out. INFJs and ENFJs need to figure out how to communicate it meaningfully to everybody else as to the whys. And so forth, cascading down from there. Why are all the senators and Congress people so well off? I would say because if you're well connected enough to be perceived as a viable choice as a representative for a community, then you probably aren't among the working poor. To be well perceived in that fashion means you have time and resources enough to become known to various people, make the scene, talk to people, whatever. So if in fact you are among the working poor, there's zero chance you're going to be perceived ultimately as a representative, or not zero chance, very little chance you're going to be perceived as a viable representative of the community. You don't have the resources to successfully run for school board, let alone president. President Eric, did you or did you not have sexual relations with your secretary? I did not. I never had a secretary. But see, the other thing is, you might very well say, I'm poor right now. I'm basically poor, you know. I have access to resources, but they aren't mine per se. And I make some money that's mine, but not that much. Rachel's even poorer than me. But my poverty is not a reason in and of itself to not vote for me. Because while I may be poor, I certainly am engaging about the topics and spending the time talking about these things, engaging with people at large and so forth. I have not. No, I have not. And this is an interesting question and a good question. Elijah asks, Eric, from what you've seen, have you not been able to identify a potential candidate who's in this public light that share the same similar vision for the country? No, I haven't encountered any politician ever that I've heard who I believe to be as even a tenth as qualified as I am. Because it takes more than just being a TI heavy thinker. You know, I don't think that I mean, that's silly. You shouldn't disqualify anybody because of some group membership. And it is not true that rich people are less concerned about the well-being of the country or what's right or wrong than other people. It's crazy. I love pineapple on my pizza. My favorite pizza is pineapple and black olives. But yeah, I can't find any other candidates who are remotely as qualified. They're not speaking correctly about politics, so how could they possibly be qualified, whatever their positions are? Because my position is foremost discursive. This is crazy, the way we're doing this, the way everybody's talking about this stuff back and forth. You have this hard position, you have this hard position, neither of you know what the hell you're thinking or talking about. Don't worry, I'm here to save the day. Nambla. If you identify as a member of a group that is a proponent of violating the rights of children, then should that disqualify you? Well, yeah, because obviously you don't care much about principle. Who was the best president of your lifetime from the current perspective? Clinton. Clinton was the the best, and primarily because he didn't do very much. He did a couple of things, and he did NAFTA, and that was a good free trade agreement. But see, the thing is, the best politicians will always be ignored because the voters are stupid and politicians reflect them. It is not the case that I will always be ignored. And if I am afforded enough of a platform that people view me, that people can, that I'm mentioned alongside some dark horse candidate or something, and get that much of a footing, then I'll take it the rest of the way. It'll be no problem. The question is how to get that much of a footing, and it's hard. Yeah, I'm not saying Clinton I'm not defending all of Clinton's policies, okay? I am saying that, or are you correcting me on him not doing much? I mean, the point is, I don't say I think everything Clinton did was great or that Clinton was ideal or anything. I'm saying it answers the question, the best president of my lifetime. I mean, I don't really think if you evaluate the presidencies, not just in my lifetime, but prior to that, I don't think it really makes sense to say that there have been any truly great presidents because, after all, none of the presidents have really prioritized changing the way people talk about politics. I mean, it is true that Trump not starting wars is a good thing. And there are a lot of other policies of Trump's that I tend to agree with. I agree with Trump on COVID, for sure. I don't know if I'd say Trump's the worst. The problem here is what you don't understand, Fiocco Kyuk, is the damage he does to the institutions of a civil society and to the institutions of democracy, the habits of democracy. We need checks and balances. We need protocols and stuff, because to the extent that those get torn down, then you have too much autocratic power being executed by one person, or you increase the likelihood of autocratic power being executed. You don't want to expand the power of any of the branches of the government. And Trump's definitely expanding the power of the presidency, so that's a bad thing. And it's the primary reason why it's impossible to say that he's anything close to a good president or even better than any other president. He's done more damage to democracy as a whole, to the institutions of democracy. Before joining the live stream, there's a Trump ad. Trump's smart with his ads. The one ad I've seen for Trump was a civil liberties ad talking about how Trump's pardoning people who got overly harsh convictions in the drug war. But see, I also remember his positions on drug laws, which are not remotely libertarian. So that's your T.I. Polar. He's like, I'll do this good thing for libertarianism, and then I'll back this law that completely contradicts that perspective, and no cognitive dissonance. Because ta-da, ESFP. Fiocco Kyuk, you're making the same mistake a lot of people make. Bernie, why did Bernie cave? Why is not because he's controlled, it's because he's T.I. Polar. He has no idea how not to cave. He's an NEFI, is not like ESFP at all. ENFPs are are AFPs are like pacifists clinging to their pacifist beliefs as a home invader is very slowly killing their family around them, and they refuse to, even though they could. It's like Bernie's like Bernie's probably INFP. He's like the INFP in Saving Private Ryan, who can't kill the German who's threatening his teammate. So of course Bernie's gonna be weak. That doesn't mean he's controlled. Weak and controlled are not the same thing. He's weak. He's not a good candidate. He never was. He's got terrible ideas. He would be a horrible president. And he doesn't know. People, like, you ask any of these candidates, why are your positions this? They have answers, but they have no knowledge or understanding. They don't really understand why. Why did Bernie cave? Because he is weak. I'm not going to cave in that fashion, for sure. It's like everybody thinks, well, in order to be a legitimate, viable candidate, you have to compromise with a broad coalition of the party or something. I disagree. I don't need to do that. What I need to do is go in there and win people's hearts and minds, and explain convincingly and in full why I ought to be the president of the United States, why I am the best candidate in the country, the only truly qualified candidate I've ever encountered in my life, why I will reinvent the presidency and make it into something that people understand differently, and that I will make it into an office about which people require their candidates to be the very best society has to offer regarding the area of governance, not complete imbeciles. And that doesn't mean the most experienced governors. People who've been in government a long time, that's not an advantage. That's not a reason to vote for them. How do we know whether somebody is going to be the best candidate regarding the issue of governance? He discusses it correctly and understands the various frames of reference and is able to explain them, and has the correct positions on things, and has the correct position on why he has the correct positions on things, and how he has the correct position on things. That's silly, Fiat Cook. That's silly. Why it's like, okay, if you're gonna pick one criterion to use to exclude people, why not exclude people who don't have the knowledge or logic to do the job? Why not exclude? Why choose that? That correlates poorly with. The funny thing is, your basic notion that wealth correlates poorly with success as a governor of some sort is correct. But it's also true that poorness correlates even more poorly with success. So that's silly. There's good things, things that correlate well with successes in government that are not related to economic status. Well, that's the thing, Martinell, is the presidency requires somebody who's able to shift focus very quickly. The worst presidents are those who come up with a big agenda. My big plan. You don't want that. Obama did that. See, Obama is not the typical ENTP in that regard. Well, I'm only advocating what's best for the USA, okay? Because I actually am running for office here, so I'm talking about US government stuff, okay? So I'm not making claims about how it plays out in other countries or what they ought to do. I'm only advocating as a candidate for president of the United States, so to speak. A lot of them do. I mean, Trump had lots of big plans. What Trump has successfully done is he's actually followed through and done everything he said he was going to do, unlike any other president. But is that a good thing? Well, it's one part of the equation, right? I mean, by and large, Trump did everything he said he was going to do. He tried to prevent Muslims from getting in the country. He wanted to build a wall on the southern border, and other stuff. He tried to kill Obama. He tried to do everything he said he was going to do. And it didn't matter if they were good ideas or not. Look, it's absolutely true that you can become insanely rich by being president or any other equivalent degree of fame. Right? Anybody else who's that degree of fame is going to be able to get rich off of it, just with appearance fees and stuff. I don't think I'm the first person in modern history to try to win with logic and reason. I think I'm the first person in modern history who can win the logic and reason half of things, but who understands, because of cognitive functions, the full dynamic of the population and how we can't just use TI to win. We need to appeal to and validate on FI grounds. We need to validate on FE grounds. We need to validate on TE grounds. And we need to explain all that things, all those sort of things appropriately. That's the difference. It's not that I'm logical and nobody else has been. I'm more rational than any president since Eisenhower, probably. But the fact that I'm more rational since any president since Eisenhower doesn't mean I'd be a better president. To be a better president means to not be limited by your reflexive nature. So I am going to be less constrained by my ENTP nature than other ENTPs. Why? Because I understand functions better, and it means I get the idea of Trump's an ESFP, such an ESFP. Ay, 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 such an ESFP. So, the challenge of a good president is going to be multiple. One of those challenges is you've got people who are talking about policies, and you've got people who are talking about causalities. And people are talking about causalities. It's important that a good candidate not get distracted by that stuff, because that's not useful talk. When James says the system desperately needs the Illuminati to keep things in check, of course, ideas like that, of shadowy central days pulling all the strings everywhere and everything, that's a way to keep away the terror of the much more terrifying reality that nobody's behind this. This is reflective of the actual insanity of human nature and the insanity that humans are capable of. That we have to blame ourselves just as much as anybody else. There's nobody to blame. There's nobody to blame. And what you can do is you can either be on a team that's working towards getting it right, that says, okay, well, we're going to focus on what the policies are going to be, because those are concrete things and meaningful. And we don't want to get distracted by, who's to blame talk. Who's to blame talk is always a way to be, to harm the citizen democracy, harm the civil society. Because It's not necessary. We're talking about what the government ought to do. Who's to blame? That's behind me. It's behind all of us at the moment. If we're talking about who should you elect, what the government ought to do, and if I'm talking about that and you're coming to me and saying, they'll never let you do that, Eric, you're a part of the problem. Why? Because you're not thinking about what I'm saying. Here, I'm here to create a proper manifestation of government. And if you want to say, I don't think your manifestation of government is going to be proper, Eric, and make arguments, I'll be happy to defend against it. If you want to say, here's an alternate advocacy I recommend, fine. But if you're going to tell me they won't let you do it, then, it's like you've already determined that it can't be done by me, and therefore you are making it impossible for me to succeed, at least from when it comes to you, because in your opinion, someone else won't let me succeed. That's just insane, That's not good thinking. Yeah, Tiny Man 66 is right. No, my dad's name is not Jake. Is your dad's name Jake? So, it's like, are there organizations in America that conspire? Sure. They're called CIA, NSA, FBI, even to a certain extent. Any organization that relies on secrecy behind the closed doors and limits the extent to which people can see what's put out in front of closed doors, then they're going to be prone to that sort of thing. Transparency is the cure to all ills of that sort of thing. Yes, I will. But like I said, Freddie, I'm probably not going to be able to run for 2020 formally. Although I'd love to see people write me in anyway. But I mean, as far as 2024 goes, a big part of my plan to start this whole thing off to sort of garner a groundswell of name recognition and potential interest would be to travel across the country, setting up sort of meetings with student unions and stuff, and campuses across the country, League of Women's Voters groups, stuff like that. Well, that's somewhat undermined by all this COVID nonsense, but that's going to be back to being a possibility soon enough. There's so many exceptions to these rules that they're making now that it's going to be impossible for them to sustain these COVID rules. If I have to, it's like, okay, everybody in here has to be absolutely silent in this room, children. Okay, Bobby, you come up here and talk to me. Well, Bobby's talking, he's not being silent, but I need him to talk. And you too, Sarah, you come up here and talk. You guys can talk amongst yourselves. The rest of you be quiet. Well, why can they talk amongst themselves? Well, because it's necessary for them to talk. According to whom? According to you? Okay, Kiak. It is not true that Scandinavia countries are now shithole countries. It is true that the the lack of adequate counter-leftist discourse in Scandinavia has harmed Scandinavia. And I plan to make sure that doesn't happen in America. I want to have anti-leftist and anti-rightist discourse. I just say we're going to do away with wrong ideas no matter where they're from. And that's the discourse that needs to be predominant in any kind of discussion like this. Somebody needs to step up and make the right arguments so that people have them. Why is this COVID shit still going down the way it is? Because the right narrative has never emerged to provide those who oppose it an affirmation. We need an aff. We can't just have a nay if you're going to win the argument. And so in this case, the aff is let it run its course. Get it over with. Get it over with. Do you think Justin Bieber is exposing himself to pizza? Do you think the pizza is going to file a complaint? Is Justin Bieber going to get Me Too'd by the pizza? Well, I guess did the pizza get Me Too'd by Justin Bieber? Well, I mean, it is true, Freddie Forgiato, that the Swedes especially have mistaken prosperity for a mandate to take in immigrants that adhere to ideologies that run afoul of basic principles of post-Enlightenment thinking, namely Islamic refugees. It's a terrible, 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 terrible idea. I don't fantasize about being president either. Here's the thing. I went through a period of time where I was going back and forth with this in my own head. This is a while back now. It's like 2018, maybe early 2019. And the reason I kept going back and forth in my head is that I didn't want to be president. I don't want to be president. But I've come to accept that it's my destiny. That I'm the only one who can do the job. I've never encountered anybody else who could possibly do the job correctly. We need something dramatic. We need a big change, Our current processes are driving the country off the edge of a cliff very slowly. And I don't want to spend so much time trying to turn the wheel of the bus or shift gears on the bus. I want to spend the time making sure that going forward, we stop, in general, driving near cliffs and arguing that we should drive off cliffs and so forth. You aren't endangering who? Who's being endangered? Bieber? He's trying to expose what? What do you mean by he's exposing pizza? What does that have to do? What are you talking about? I don't know what you guys are talking about at all. I gotta look into this. Google News. Oh, you mean the 20 million defamation suit over sexual assault tweets? Are you talking about? I don't think that Justin Bieber sexually assaulted anybody. I know this isn't necessarily a good indicator, but he doesn't mean to sexually. He has more women throwing at themselves at him than he knows what to do with. Who doubts that? Who doubts what, Delord? Well, I mean, I do. I do sound like an INTJ in that regard. I'm stepping forward when I think nobody else is confident enough to be leader. Who's trying to tell me something? Look up John Podesta pizza emails. Okay. A child sex trafficking ring run out of a Washington pizzeria? Hillary Clinton and John T. Podesta supposedly ran a child something ring out of this pizza place. That's silly. I mean, this is um, a frequent avenue of hysteria. It happened when I was fairly little in this thing called like the DeMartin. What was it called? '80s famous preschool child abuse case. McMartin, that's what it's called. The McMartin case. The McMartin preschool trial was a daycare sexual abuse case in the 1980s, prosecuted by LA District Attorney Ira Reiner. Members of the McMartin family were charged with numerous acts of sexual abuse of children. Accusation remained in 1983. Arrests and pre-trial investigation took place from 84 to 87. Trials ran from 87 to 1990. The case lasted 7 years, but resulted in no convictions, and all charges were dropped in 1990. By the case's end, it became the longest and most expensive case in American history. The case was part of a daycare sex abuse hysteria, a moral panic over alleged satanic ritual abuse in the 1980s and 90s. If you look into this case, it's insane how basically these adults fed these preschoolers these ridiculous stories and then got them fed back to them and said it's evidence and stuff. It's ridiculous. Maybe he was having a inauguration party or something. I don't know. Maybe he really liked hot dogs. Yeah, sure, you can be my secretary. Can Kirsten Summer for you. I bet you wouldn't be a very good secretary, though. I mean, you'd be fine, but you'd be kind of lazy, probably. INFJs tend to be a little lazy, like HBs do, too. I mean, Nicholas Watson, what I'm saying is, if in fact such a thing was going on there, I'm going to need more. It's going to need to meet a higher standard of proof than something that's a less dramatic claim. And you know, it needs to be some sort of actual evidence, not, well, explain this then. You know, explain this then is fine. Something might look very suspicious and not have it. You might, just because I can't come up with a good explanation for it doesn't mean it's your explanation for it. That doesn't mean the correct explanation is your explanation. So I would like to think that I'm appropriately skeptical. I don't reject all such conspiracy notions out of hand, but I also recognize that people are subject to go to WikiLeaks and read the emails about what? What do I Google? Fiat Kiak. The Podesta emails. I don't see any. Okay, well, is there any particular email I'm supposed to look at? Hmm. I don't understand what these emails are supposed to tell me. It just seems like a bunch of oh, I see. Hmm. Did you leave a handkerchief? Hmm. Seems pizza related. I mean, hmm. I mean, I get the idea that there's a lot of references in this stuff to pizza, but I mean, I'm pretty sure it refers to drugs, if anything, not sex. Hmm. Where's the JPEG? This is a red herring. These are mostly. I mean, the thing is, what is. I want to know what that picture was. Pizza.jpg. What's the news.vocus.com? Interesting. Hmm. Okay. All right. I looked at this a long time now. I looked at a lot of those things. Um, I suspect it's a swinger group of adults. There's definitely something going on there with pizza. Um, but I don't think it's. There's no reason to conclude it's pedophilia. You know. I agree that I want to see what pizza.jpg, what that picture is of. You know, it's not included in the emails. If you're using Chrome, no JPEG will appear. Oh, if you use a different browser, it will, or what? What's it a picture of? I'm looking at the WikiLeaks emails. didn't see that one. I mean, I believe those to be legitimate emails by those people. I haven't seen that email. I went through almost all of them. I mean, like, this email here makes it pretty clear. This is one of the emails that seems to make it pretty clear that pizza is a euphemism for something. Because it says, the realtor found a handkerchief. I think it has a map that seems pizza related. Is it yours? They can send it if you want. I know you're busy, so feel free not to respond if it's not yours or you don't want it. And then this one is pretty convincing too. Like the pizza.jpg one, and he says, oh, there's another one here I'm looking for though that I saw a second ago. Like this one, 29th Street between Park and Madison, right around the corner. Let me know. Or I could bring a pizza home. Tony. What? What is he talking about? Oh, 815 dinner at Marta. See, that seems like it's probably just a pizza, right? That was the one I was just looking at, though. It said something like, this is our new pizza logo. Don't forward. And this one says like a normal usage of the word. It says, not sure when John gets home, but we have Alan signed up for dinner on the 23rd. If you will be around for dinner and pizza on Sunday, we'd love to see you and hear about Addison, California. That seems like a regular usage of the term. But, I mean, I don't know. I'm looking at them all. I don't see any. I put the search term in email as pizza. Is there something else I should put there instead of pizza? Party? I don't know. I can't dig through all those emails. It's boring. Let's see what Wikipedia says about it. Wikipedia says, in March 2016, the personal email account of John Podesta was hacked in a spear phishing attack. WikiLeaks published his emails and Proponents of Pizzagate conspiracy theory falsely claim the emails contained coded messages that connected several high-ranking Democratic Party officials in U.S. restaurants with alleged human trafficking and child sex. No alleged victims have come forward and no physical evidence has been found. I don't see anything about any particular email that well, I would believe, based on what I've read, and I didn't hear anything in this article, and I haven't seen anything that they actually describe it as such. It would sort of defeat the purpose of having a name for it to be called pizza, you know. And I suspect they're swingers. I don't think it's anything more complicated than that. There's nothing I see that would indicate anything worse than that. I do believe that pedophiles use coded words. That makes sense. If there's any sort of community among them, then I guess they would have to. You know, what they're doing is among the most hated things a person can possibly do in society. Okay, one more. When I read through that thing there, all those emails, I agree that pizza is clearly a code word for something. There's a picture called pizza.jpg, and the thing underneath it is, it doesn't get any better than this, and then the response is nice. You don't do that about a picture of an actual pizza, right? It's obviously not the case. You don't say, here's a new image of our pizza logo, don't forward. Now if you're talking about pizza, but Cloud, what did I just successfully made the case that it is a code word for something. So why do you think it's for children? Why wouldn't it be the case that a bunch of adult swingers who like to have sex parties and take pictures of each other having sex with each other and share those pictures and stuff, why would it not be just as easily the case that it's referencing that activity? Why not? There's no reason to jump to the conclusion that you jump to. Could be just prostitutes in general. It doesn't have to be children. Could be drugs. It's hard to say, since they seem to have pretty successfully not been clear about what their code word means, as is naturally going to be the best way to apply a code word. Then there's no way for us to know what it is. Okay, Cloud, no, I don't play that game. I've told so many people this already. I don't play that game. If you can't convince me of your position because you don't know the arguments, then you shouldn't hold that position. You shouldn't be telling me to listen to somebody else who can convince me of it. If you don't understand the arguments, you shouldn't hold the position. Not I should be also convinced by what didn't teach you anything. That's silly. It's insanity, You're the one who's making the claim. So you must have a good reason to believe it. Something definitive to believe it. If you don't, and you can't articulate it, or you can't articulate it, then you are believing wrong. You are incorrectly believing. You're engaging in the process of belief incorrectly. It's one of the things I have to explain to people with really low TI all the time is I am not going to do your work for you. If you want me to agree with you, convince me. Don't direct me someplace where you were convinced. I'm already aware that you don't have as strong an understanding of what should or should not be convincing as I do. So why would I? It's like the fact that you were convinced by some video is not any reason whatsoever to watch the video or to think that it's correct about anything. You can't articulate anything correct about it, then it's probably not anything correct to say. Right? It's just common sense. Look, Lawnmower, that's not correct, okay? There's no such thing as a satanic belief system that represents most self-proclaimed Satanists that advocates in favor of child abuse. Most Satanists do nothing of the sort. Most self-identified Satanists. And Satanism, like any other magical thinking format, is arbitrary or subjective. The person who's self-identifying as such can define it as they want, more or less. If I were to define my Christianity as adhering to the Quran and believing that Muhammad is Allah's prophet and stuff, then that would be wrong. Okay, that would be misnaming myself. But if in fact I am arguing that the best interpretation of Satanism is some sort of idea that constraining one's wills by altruism is ill-advised, well, then that would be a morally permissible position to hold, because it's not It's not advocating for the violation of rights. Children have rights too, and they have rights that come not only from ownership of their own body, but they've got limits on those rights in childhood because they're in their minority. In other words, all children have regents for their agency until they reach their majority. And if anything, the majority maybe should be made slightly older, like 21 instead of 18. But the reason for that is because we understand that every agent takes with them into adulthood a the resources they've accumulated in anticipation of adulthood. And we want them to be able to get a fresh start as a young adult, you know? Okay, but all right, so let's say you're right, Lenore, that that the FBI exposed this. So I want to see, link me to or point me to, tell me what to Google. I want to see some sort of FBI report where they confirm this, or some sort of data, some sort of evidence that confirms it. I looked at the Wikipedia, the WikiLeaks emails, and I agree that it's code for something. Get me to agree with you then. Show me a piece of evidence that I can agree with. You know? Crowley is not the what's in it? He's not the Brigham Young of Satanism, okay? That's a name. The idea that there's a moral course that involves prioritizing the human will is the core of Satanism. And it's not inherently wicked at all. There's nothing inherently wicked about that notion. I think it's wrong, but there's nothing inherently wicked about it. Its wrongness tends to manifest as the affirmation that only negative rights count and there are no positive moral indications. And in that regard, it's tended to be viewed as debauchery justifying, which is a fair critique. But it doesn't mean that sort of the truest form of Satanism is Aleister Crowley's whatever. And to the extent that people are engaged in any sort of inappropriate contact with underage people, then they deserve to be arrested and punished for that. But the thing is, that's not our job as voters, so to speak, right? That's the FBI's job. That's the cops' job. Our job as voters is to not get distracted by stuff that's not very topical, right? We don't need to have wrong people be Satanist child molesters to oppose them. We can oppose them just on the grounds that they're wrong. That's the best reason to oppose them. And that's the biggest problem I have with what everybody's saying here, is that we are so focused upon how blameworthy people are so worthy of blame and all the things they've done and why, and these sort of secret hidden reasons as to why they act like that and stuff, that we are playing right into the hands of those who would like to see the citizen democracy not reclaim citizen ownership of it. Playing right into their hands. Because that stuff's not relevant about what we ought to do. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with you at all, Nicholas Watson, that Satanists tend to embrace the 7 deadly sins that are in the Christian Bible. I see every human being, no matter who, battling with their own tendencies towards excess in one area or another. Certainly it includes me. And for some, that excess might correlate with one of the 7 deadly sins, gluttony, for example, or lust or whatever. For some, it might be an excessive application of a single frame. I would say it's, in my opinion, that's a fair critique of Lawnmower. That he's trying to make his moral framework his framework for everything, and I don't necessarily think that's well advised. It'll tend to lead you astray into some explanations that are maybe satisfying but incorrect, maybe satisfyingly complete, and they give you a good sense of where to direct your anger. See, that's the frustrating thing about reality, is it doesn't give us good places to direct our anger, really. And it doesn't make direction of anger particularly productive. I find that to be the case always with myself, that I'm most convincing, most productive in general in my communications when I'm least angry, and I'm most sort of honest. I'm not playing rhetorical games where I'm being like burn or whatever. I'm just explaining as best I can, and as in as disinterested a fashion as I can. When people see that the reason, this is one thing I would like for people to understand or believe. Whether it's true or not, I'll leave up to you to decide. But one thing I would like people to believe, or I'd like people to interpret me, you might say, is that I would like them to understand my pedantry, my apparent arrogance, and my tendency to not really care about people's feelings when correcting them or something like that. They might perceive that as arrogance or just wanting to be right or whatever. The reality is much more complicated than that. It's or much simpler. The reality is I care. I'm not apathetic. And I got two choices, basically. Either be apathetic about the whole thing and not care, remove myself from the equation, or accept my inevitable participation in the process and thereby do my duty to the extent that I can. And adulthood often comes in the form of doing one's duty despite the fact that it runs afoul of one's desires or even interests. And so you are the last person to have commented. Freddie Forgiato. Who's Freddie Forgiato's profile pic? I don't know who that is that he's depicting. I do recognize the hat as the so-called Chinaman hat. But I do believe in the country. I do believe in this union called America. And oh, that's Crowley. Okay. Well, I don't have any strong position on Crowley one way or the other. I understand people walk down a lot of bad narrative paths and sometimes get committed to them. Often will double down on these bad narrative paths. I certainly condemn bad action, and if someone's being an apologist for bad action, I want to hold them to account for that as well. But it's the case that every every faith-based modality is incorrectly used by adherents, some of the adherents, to try to justify meanings about the world that are universal. And that's not an acceptable justification for meanings about the world that are universal. I have heard about that. That's a British guy who was a child molester for a lot of years, had a TV show or something, right? Remember? Well, and so what's wrong with using the same symbols as the Masons? What does that mean? Freddie Forgiato, are you an INFJ by any chance? Not only changing it for FE purposes, but also for FE purposes, declaring that's why you're changing it. He's connected to those people. I mean, look, just because we see, instances of individuals who are guilty of those kind of crimes, and we see multiple people who are guilty of those kind of crimes who are, say, rich and famous, let's say, it doesn't mean there's some organization of rich and famous people who are into that shit. It's possible. I'm not saying it's impossible. But, I mean, I just don't understand what the satisfaction could possibly be for the dominant elites to do all this evil stuff. Like, why are they more evil than other people? If any of us here became a so-called dominant elite, okay, that makes sense too. Yeah, that makes total sense. If any of us here became a dominant elite, quote unquote, would we suddenly start doing evil things for no reason? I mean, why? It's like my appetites right now are whatever they are. Becoming powerful is not going to change those appetites, right? I'm still, like, as it is in the status quo, just it was my current amount of social status. I could slay the puss if I wanted to. I could not be in a relationship and I could just bang a bunch of chicks. I could probably get a succession of chicks to fly out here and have sex with me if I wanted to, right? But my appetites don't change as my status rises. I don't like that. I want to be in one relationship with one person and be faithful and stuff. The purpose isn't to be evil. The purpose is to get it on tape so they can be controlled. Okay, well, but that's okay. But the point is, to get me on tape doing something evil, I have to have decided I want to do that evil thing. So you don't answer the question. Why is it that they find that fun for some reason? The cloud seems to think it's a precondition of gaining power that you have to be evil, but it's clearly not. The music industry is not tied to that occultism. There is no central controlling voice in the music industry directing the artist to rap about this or that. Rappers like to do things that sound hard. When they hear Crowley the Satanist, it fits in with their whole shtick. It makes perfect sense, Rappers, young kids, and stuff in general, when they're being creative, they like to be edgy. They like to push on acceptable boundaries of what's considered acceptable by other people. It's not the culture, though. There's no unified culture in the music industry like that. It doesn't work like that. Individual people are individual people. That's it. You got to remember that the vast majority of people enter into either politics or the entertainment industry as adults, and they have their identity already determined largely. If I were to enter in the music industry and everybody's sleeping around, which is certainly plausible. It seems to me in the entertainment industry, there's probably more infidelity than in other businesses. mostly because people have to travel on set and work in close quarters with people away from their significant other for long periods of time. Regardless, I would not adopt that casualness towards sexual intercourse if I were in the entertainment industry. I wouldn't have time to be spending being in the entertainment industry. I'd be doing whatever work it is I have to do there, and then I've got my other shit going on. No, it's not true. That's not true, Lawnmower. That's simply wrong. I don't know what the hot sauce condom trap is. Blame it on COVID, Kyuk. If you're looking for patterns like that, you're going to find them, and they're going to not be correct. It's not true that all artists have at least one picture of them holding an OK sign over one eye. It's a symbol. This, you mean? It's for that thing. I remember when that came out. It was about, well, I would say probably 8 years ago or something, 10 years ago. It came out on the basketball courts first. What does it mean? But what does it, do you know what it actually means? It means 3 points, 3-ball, 3-pointer. Boom, money, 3-pointer. You see it in basketball games all the time when they shoot from behind the arc. No, it doesn't, Lawnmower. It represents what the person intends it to represent. For young rappers, it represents 3-pointer. For the basketball players who only do it when they shoot 3-pointers and don't do it any other time, it represents 3-pointers. The amount of centralized control you guys are imagining is indicative of the fact that you don't understand this is not an NI thing. Your NI is going to lead you astray. It's a multivariate, chaotic system, and your NI is very poorly equipped to finding the correct answer and very well equipped to being misleading you into a wrongness. And that's what it's done for both of you, Lawnmower and Kyuk. Okay, well, I'm thinking maybe the rappers who are doing it, the singers and stuff, might be doing that for the same reason they're wearing a basketball jersey. Because they're trying to co-opt some of the cool from professional basketball onto their brand of singing and stuff. Of course. You know. Doesn't that make sense? Most people don't interpret it that way, Lawnmower. And yet, many, many people, surely you have to acknowledge this. Okay, Lawnmower, come on. No, Lawnmower, think. Be real, okay? Be real. Most people in the world who do this don't think it means what you think it means. Almost nobody thinks it means what you think it means. So the fact is, even if there are a couple of people, Lawnmower, who somehow, when they're doing it, mean what you say they mean, the vast majority of people who do that mean something very, very different. And you are incorrect to think that there is a blizzard of Satanism going on right now. It's crazy and wrong. Because they didn't like religion, Cloud. That's why. I mean, it's pretty clear John Lennon didn't like religion. He sang in his Imagine song that we'd be better off without any religion. I mean, look, it's like, okay, well, why is the music industry comprised of people different than the general public? Where do you think people in the music industry come from? The general public. Why do they all then, as soon as they become a card-carrying member of the The Nash, what's it called? The Recording Professionals Association or whatever. Mentos Jones says, I had the same problem trying to correct my INFJ friends' views on the satanic music garbage. My friend's old enough and wise enough to know better, but he's quite religious. The bottom line is NI is not always the appropriate way to engage with an idea. And this is not one of those areas where you should be using NI. It requires something that's non-mythological. What does NI do? It is a mythological function. It knows what the mythos of a thing is. But what we're looking for here is not mythos. We're looking for, we're looking to draw conclusions predicated on a proper understanding of system dynamics. And yours is predicated on a false understanding of system dynamics. Systems don't work like that. Okay, but you say there's a certain culture within that environment, but it's not true. If you look at musical artists, they run the whole gamut of different kinds of styles, approaches, blah, blah, blah. Sure, everybody shares some certain youth culture things, like the three-pointer thing, dabbing, or you know, like I go, you know, rock and roll, hook 'em horns all the time. Lawnmower might think these are devil horns and this is subverting the devil. No, these are heavy metal hand sign. That's what this is called. Heavy metal hand sign. So what I mean by it matters a lot more than what you think I mean by it. Because I'm correct about what I mean by it and you're incorrect. I've already looked into it. There's no smoking gun here. This is an NI conclusion based on all that pizza evidence that it must be something awful. I agree with the NI conclusion that it's a euphemism for something or a code word for something. But that does not mean we jump to the conclusion that it's the code word for the worst possible thing imaginable. That's called being reasonable. All right, I'm going to wrap this up. See you all later. Thanks for being here.